In studying the history of the civil rights movement, one of the things that I think often gets talked about is the window of opportunity that came up during the 60s for change. And some of the things that is often talked about that go into that are the relationships built between people living in poverty and a direct line to the federal government through New Deal policies, Great Society policies, the so-called war on poverty. And I was wondering, based on the conversation that we just had, whether you believe that this direct line still exists today, if it's still there or narrowing, closing.
I don't think that that direct line still exists. The path to its resurrection and to get that back on course, I think, is critical to the choices that will be made, not only in this election, but in how we manipulate governance in the immediate future. I think, government is, as abstract as we try to make it, it's really quite tangible. It's made up of men and women who come from the communities that we know. And what this apparatus, this mechanism does is that it's a selective process. We move with groups of people towards protecting certain interests, which more often than not rely on self-interests. And if a particular power within the social norms gravitate towards one another and seizes that power, then they seize the process. So right now, for instance, most of the banks and most of the Wall Street and most of the things that the court did in saying no transparency and give endless money to causes will make a huge shift in the way in which there is a true democratic representation of what we will hear. That will have a continued impact on the fact that they're drawing away all the tools of support, all the humanities, all the things that we thrived on as a nation to ensure that citizens who were in need would never be in dire need, that we'd always be there and to be generous and to be giving. Everything that attracted the world at large to want to come to America is in jeopardy. I think people always saw America as fair. People always saw America as the place that was campaigning in behalf of justice or on behalf of good. And now that has been seriously blurred. And in that blurring, what it has done is taken away the humanity from the nation. And the humanity is expressed from a legislative perspective in how do we take care of health? How do we take care of how our children are being informed? What price can you put on that? There should be no price on education. As a matter of fact, it should be a human right, a civil right, a social right, and that everybody has the right to education with never a concern about how they will pay for it. And the same thing about health. If you surrendered everything else and just said we have the right to free speech, the right to health, and the right to education, almost everything else will take care of itself. And these things always come out of what is dismissed by others as a kind of social philanthropy, which is not to the best interest of the nation because it creates beggars, it dampens enthusiasm, it dampens creativity. Well, some of the greatest experiences America has ever had was at the height of its social generosity. If you take a look just from the point of view of culture, if you take a look at the 1920s and the 30s when the WPA was in, and they gave money to the local communities to have art classes and dance classes and literature and to study, this tremendous reward and harvest of culture from actors and playwrights and books and Faulkner and Hemingway and Steinbeck and all the great forces that wrote to social truths, inspired the nation and the best that was in us. And somebody came along one day and said, enough of that. We should stop feeding that crowd. We should now exploit this harvest. And when capital moved in and commanded the cultural turf, because they did, art is not controlled by artists. It's controlled by those who put a price on commodity, because we are a commodity. If you don't get the sponsor to approve of you to be in a TV show that he says will be made and created in the images that he wants, then we're back into a period where we don't have objectivity. We don't have multiple voices saying things. We have no contradictions. And I think when we stamped out subsidy to the humanities, we stamped out a big part of the American heart, the American soul, because turning around to pull our neighbor up has always been the image of who we are. The thing that made slavery work, at least be dismantled in the final analysis, were not just the fact that black Africans seized their moment and courageously went into overthrowing slavery, but there was a huge armada of abolitionists and people who had another humanity that came with enormous philanthropy and giving and a basket of goodies to help change. And that change gave us a higher society, a higher order in which to exist. But the enemy never, ever sleeps. Never. The minute we catch a moment and change the game, they move instantly to find the counter change. And they eventually win. Where we are right now, in our own space in this country, those guys on the opposition side had a 40-year plan. They weren't just looking at the election for the next 2 years or the next moment and the dog catcher. They're busy saying, how do we take this whole thing over? And it takes time and patience and resources and cunning. So that in time, we lost the court. In time, we lost the Congress. In time, we lose the executive chair and all that it should represent. All that they need is time to have while the rest of us are down here groveling with these insane little ideas and these little minuscule things that are not really about the real game. We're not in it. How can we be in a war that has lasted longer than any encounter this nation has ever had in an act of hostility, and nobody pays attention? Nobody cares. Nobody gets the latest statistic out of Afghanistan or what's going on, and we don't really care. As a matter of fact, if we could just hurry up and get out of there, most Americans wouldn't care if that part of the world went to hell in a basket. We have lost all sorts of moral balance, all sorts of analyses that are important to human uplifting and existence. And I make that claim for us because that's what we said we were. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Well, that's not very abstract, is it? It's very specific. I mean, we could have fixed the gender use of just men, but in truth, that's what America's about. That's what it pumped into all of us. That's what made us who we are. That's what gives us the diversity that sits right here at this moment on this campus, trying to push ourselves through this labyrinth of stuff being thrown at us and trying to find the answers. And the first thing I think we have to find is, where is our humanity? Not where's your next job, not where's your next paycheck, not where's your next occupation. As important as that is something far more fundamental. Where's your soul? What really is where's your moral center? What do you really hold to be self-evident? What is your truth? Get that in place, everything else will work, I think.